This is Radio Ukraine International with the weekly program Doing Business, hosted by Rodion Zhiznyevsky and produced by Konstantin Lavrentyuk. Doing Business covers current economic developments in and concerning Ukraine and gives topical information as well as immediate and longer-term economic forecasts. It is what we think might give you food for thought and help you see Ukraine through the economic angle. Today we continue our conversation with Serhii Korsunsky, the newly appointed ambassador to Japan, on economic aspects of Ukrainian-Japanese relations and their near-time prospects. Today our topic is economic ties between Ukraine and Japan, one of the world's leading economies. Although it is very far from us geographically, its products are well known and appreciated all over this country. Japanese businesses have consistently attracted an incredible amount of cash investment. A surplus of finances, an increase in Japanese investment, and expansion of cooperation are of great importance for Ukraine's economic development. However, few Japanese companies are so far represented in Ukraine. These are mainly those producing car parts. One of the first and best known of them is Yazaki Ukraine, a branch of the international corporation Yazaki, which manufactures various products for the automotive industry. The share of its direct investment is estimated at some $45 million, being still one of the largest in Ukraine. The company was registered near the Transcarpathian city of Uzhhorod in October 2002, and it supplies cables to automaking industries in most European countries. Following it, Fujikura and Sumitomo Electric Industries built their factories in Ukraine as well. Fujikura Automotive Ukraine is a Ukrainian branch of Fujikura, an enterprise producing electrical equipment for cars. Its factory is located near Lviv. Sumitomo Electric Bortnitsa, a manufacturer of cable networks for Volkswagen, opened its first plant in the Ternopil region and in 2013 launched two more branches in the Chernivtsi and Ternopil regions. In addition, Sumitomo Corporation has acquired a local enterprise that manufactures agricultural equipment. Most of other Japanese companies are investing in agricultural business in Ukraine. Ukraine's advantage is its geographical location in the center of Europe, which facilitates Japan's ties with the European Union's common market. Ukraine is also rich in different resources, and the most valuable of them is the qualified workforce. Considering that, plus the low salaries, Japanese companies ought to be interested to invest in Ukrainian industries that sell their products on European markets. Nevertheless, for some reason, these opportunities remain largely untapped. Cultural and scientific relations between the two countries are at the level of informational shows, short-term trainings, and language courses for beginners only. Unlike Americans, Europeans, or Asians, very few Japanese visit Ukraine. We continue our conversation with Serhii Korsunsky, the newly appointed ambassador to Japan, on economic aspects of Ukrainian-Japanese relations and their near-time prospects. The Ukrainian parliament has a group for interparliamentary relations with Japan, which numbers 117 MPs. Can you tell us about the group's activity?
2 weeks ago, we have had online session with our group of friendship, and we have very substantial discussion. And let me tell you, they were very helpful to promote this agenda, which I just explained to you, similar agenda explained to them, and they were very helpful to move forward with this agenda in Ukraine. Let me just remind you, just factual fact, that they were created a year ago, and that was COVID year. During COVID year, there were no contacts in between parliamentarians. We expect this year, in October, visit of a group of our members of parliament, very small group, but they want to do it, and we want to do it. They will be coming to Japan to work with their counterparts. Let me stress, because of nature of government in Japan, and this is constitution monarchy, That means that Parliament is playing extremely important role, much more important than in some other countries. So members of the government, at the same time, they're members of the Parliament. They are from ruling party. They are very well connected through political agenda. So the tradition of parliamentarism in Japan is very strict. So they have party which exists for several decades. They have program, they have platform. Everyone knows for what they stand for. So it's very important. For example, I work with members of parliament of Japan. I met with 5 or 6 of them, with most important people, key people. They are very knowledgeable. Many of them, they're former ministers, they're former deputy ministers. In every ministry, there is at least one, they call it parliamentary deputy minister. That means that he plays special role in the ministry. It's like a training. So they choose a member of parliament, which from point of view of the ruling party, a kind of have perspective for the future. And they appoint him like deputy, say, foreign minister or minister of defense, deputy. But they call it parliamentary minister, deputy minister. And this person works both in the government and in the parliament. And it's like a training. Next, his position or her position will be ministerial. From my point of view, this is a very good idea. So they prepare future governments. If they need to change somebody, no problem. It's very quickly. Because if there is majority, this is majority. It's not a game. They cannot change colors. They cannot change parties. This is majority. It is majority. So it is very important if they have understanding with members of parliament on Ukrainian side. So we just at the beginning stage, but I was very encouraged to talking to them. I found huge interest in developing relations with Japan exactly in the lines which I told you right now. So it is very important if they understand importance of free trade, importance of business relations, and importance of supporting investment from Japan to Ukraine. So I hope that we will be, once this COVID situation will allow us, we will see much more contacts on the parliamentary level, which I consider extremely important.
About 5 years ago, the issue of imports of Ukrainian agricultural products to Japan was discussed in Japan at the ministerial level. It was decided then to import Ukrainian chicken meat, wheat, and sunflower oil. How do things stand now?
Everything already in place. Chicken and sunflower and many other products, confectionery, those processed vegetables and processed fruits, so ready products, they're already here, yes. What we do, since I arrived 4.5 months ago, we are trying hard to explain to Japanese companies and to Japanese government that Ukraine deserve much more attention, both on governmental level and on business level. So I met with every chairman of every agency which deals with Ukraine, with every governmental official responsible for international trade, with all 6 chairmen and CEOs of all 6 major trade houses of Japan, Big 6 so-called. They all present in Ukraine. They all know our potential. What I'm saying, that we have to change completely the framework of our cooperation. What we put now on the table, free trade agreement. We are like now in the epicenter of discussions both with Ukrainian government and with Japanese government to put free trade. Why? That is very important because I'm sure in Ukraine maybe 5 people understand that. Japan is a huge superpower in trade. Really. They import 70% of agricultural products, food products. And that is hundreds of billions of dollars. That's number one. Number two, they sell their trade turnover of Japan, $1.5 trillion. So they're among 5 first nations in the world by trade. And if you look how Japan is connected with the outside world from trade point of view, you will find a peculiar picture. Japan is like a nodal right in the center of very important network of free trade agreements, beginning from European Union on one hand and United States on the other side. So covering 80% of world GDP. 80%. So they are part of at least 4 huge multilateral free trade zones. They have bilateral free trade with the same countries we do, with Britain, with European Union, with Canada, their bigger trade partner, China for Ukraine too. So we have everything in place, first to understand each other, and then to strike a deal which will be very advantageable. Japanese, those 6 major trade houses of Japan, they're multilateral corporations. That means they have offices in 60, some of them 70 countries. They trade in between the world without any specific goals. For example, a company, one of the trade houses, which buys Ukrainian sunflower oil, sells it not to Japan, but to Middle East, to Africa, to America. We don't see that because this is export to countries of Africa, Middle East, or America. But actually, that is Japan trade houses. So that is why, as I said, I met with every one of them, with some of them many times. That's what we are talking about, that we have to understand clearly the importance of Japan is much bigger than just third economy in the world. Just one member of G7 from Asia. This is truly trade superpower. Of course, China is bigger, but China will never have any free trades with EU, with United States, never. Japan is part of all that.
You're listening to Radio Ukraine's weekly program, Doing Business. Apart from agricultural sphere, what else can be interesting for Japan to invest in?
Yes, they're interested in IT, but again, there are some Ukrainian companies which are in contact with their Japanese counterparts. But there is kind of a problem. Let me explain. It could be, maybe it will be a surprise for some Ukrainians, but Japanese people, they do not speak English. They don't need it. Those who work on international businesses, they do. But the people who work with Ukraine, if you just exclude case of Rakuten and maybe several other big companies which are interested in IT, the majority of IT Japanese companies, they are Japanese-centered. What I mean, they're not looking for global presence like Alibaba or Amazon. They have Rakuten, which is online, a huge online shop, but it mostly serves to Japanese consumers. I was surprised to learn that they don't speak English, and I asked them, why? And the answer was very peculiar. The answer was, we have everything we need for a happy life inside Japan. Everything. And let me tell you, I will give you an example. I simply can't imagine that if, say, a Japanese person has enough money in yen, he will go to exchange shop and will buy dollars and will keep money in dollars. Being afraid, for example, that Japanese economy is not stable. I can't imagine that. They will never do that because the market, the structure of the society, their mood and population is Japanese-centered. They understand they have no other land to live. They understand there is no other place to develop, to have families, to live. They love their country. So everything here in Iena, and in spite of the fact that Japan has, I'm not sure, 250% of the external debt, 250% of GDP or something, but nobody cares because economy of Japan brings profit. Trade brings plus to economy. Say last year it was plus $69 billion or something. Before that it was $269 billion. I mean, Japan trade in surplus to the economy. So nobody cares about their external debt because country is so integrated into international business, in exchanges, in programs. So Japan is among biggest provider of official, they call it ODA, official development assistance, and the biggest investor. They last year, COVID year, Japan invested abroad $170 billion. So That means that Japan is very specific in its kind of vision. There are those smaller companies which would like to do some IT business. There are some examples, but it's not yet big. So firstly, it's agriculture. And mostly, I think I try to push them. That's heavy machinery. That's what we try to do. And let me tell you as well, I didn't mention that yet. For those 29 years of our relations, Japan assistance to Ukraine exceeded $3.5 billion altogether. So when a Ukrainian citizen is flying from Borispil Airport Terminal D, let him know that this terminal is built with credit from Japan. And this credit is like for 40 years, 0.1%. So this is actually a gift. It's not a credit. But that is, for example, that's what Japan does. 26th of February, there was another tender in Ukraine. Finally took place. That's for Bortnichi sewage station. Again, if you live on the left bank of Kyiv, or you go to Borispil, very often you have a funny smell before you exit Kyiv on this ring, big ring. You know what I'm talking about. And that is this is exactly the place which smells nicely. That's Bortnichi. So Japan provided $1 billion credit, again, for 40 years, for almost 0%, a very small percent. This is official development assistance. So they provided this credit. And finally, after 5 years of doing nothing, I don't know why, I have no explanation, don't want to speculate. But that's what my number one goal. And that president of Ukraine, Zelensky, specifically requested me to take care of this project because this is a kind of unexplainable. There is money, and the only thing you have to organize is tender. And that is, for 5 years, was standing and without any movement. Finally, 26th of February, this tender took place. Now it's a period of that Ukrainian side will consider their proposals submitted to the tender. But once it is done, finally this year, we will begin the reconstruction of this station. Reconstruction with participation of top-notch Japanese equipment and technology. And let me tell you, they do have technology, proper technology. And we will get rid of this smell, number one. And number two, the water which goes after this sewage cleaning to Dnipro River will be like clean water, not what we have right now. And you know how Dnipro River looks like in August. It's green because of organic in it. So that is a huge importance project for Ukraine. That's Japan. That's how Japan present in Ukraine. Quietly, without a lot of noise, without making PR in the media and screaming around that we are helping. They quietly, they do it. They provide this year multi-million assistance to Donetsk and Lugansk. They provided several medical, very big, expensive medical equipment to several hospitals. So that's Japan. Again, what I mean, this country is much bigger than we just know about sushi, aikido, and Akira Kurosawa. This country is truly important, and if you carefully think about it, this is what I do every day, as you may guess. You can find a lot of opportunities, new opportunities, and IT, which you mentioned, among them. So we try to connect now IT companies in between Ukraine and Japan, and there is a big interest. It's still on the stage of interest, but we will see how it will develop.
Japan has always been one of Ukraine's biggest donors. Japanese grant programs in the fields of healthcare and education are well known. What grant projects and in what sectors is Japan offering now?
Actually, those grants are being provided by the Japanese government, so you should better ask Japanese embassy in Kyiv. What we know that all those activities are still in place. The only restriction, which is now very seriously altered this kind of cooperation, that's COVID. Japan is now closed. You can't come to Japan. Simply cannot at all. So you're not going to receive a visa. Only for those who are already accredited, like those who works here or permanently live here, or like we diplomats, we can go and come back. So very, very cautious about COVID. And again, I am very cautious about naming these figures in Ukrainian media because this should not be, kind of shock, because we have here restrictions, a quarantine, very flexible, but still quarantine in Tokyo. And we still have country closed for foreign travel with 121 cases per day in 38 million Tokyo, 121 yesterday. They are very cautious. Any kind of viruses is very dangerous. And Olympic Games is ahead. And they just began vaccination. So all those grant programs, what they do now, they now announce for students who would like to study in Japan. So this is, they do it, but it's like for fall, maybe October, November, maybe next year. So right now, we have to survive this pandemic and and to lift all those restrictions. It is very complicates our life.
Could you tell us about the process of vaccination in Japan?
They just began a week ago vaccinations, and they began with doctors. Then there will be elders, but they contracted necessary for everybody, including foreigners, including foreign diplomats. But that will be probably, I guess, in June, maybe July. So first of all, of course, and this is the right thing to do, they care about those people who are very vulnerable. Let me tell you, for last year, a little bit more than 6,000 people died from COVID in Japan. And the population of Japan is 125 million. This is a very small number. Actually, believe it or not, again, I am very cautious because I put it on my Facebook page just to inform those who are interested in. But last year, they officially registered less deaths altogether than usual. So number of deaths decreased, not increased during pandemic year. Why I'm saying that? We try to we explain this to our Ministry of Health. We send letters to them from time to time about Japanese experience in dealing with COVID. We believe this experience is very worth consideration. It is very important experience because the results of last year, they have altogether less deaths than usual. Only 6,500. Of course, it's terrible, but it's still very small number compared to any other country in Europe. So they have their own technology how to deal with pandemic. That is why they were very cautious with vaccinations. They didn't do it until they carefully considered all the documents, all the results for all vaccines. They do not trust names. It has absolutely zero effect to say, this is Johnson & Johnson, or this is AstraZeneca. For Japan, it doesn't work. Bring documents, bring vaccine, we will check everything because they have science, they have professionals, and they check everything. So finally, they say, okay, on 15th of February, they finally approved all those major vaccines, and they began to bring into Japan and begin inoculations.
And with that, we end the interview with Ukraine's ambassador to Japan, Sergій Korsunsky. That was Radio Ukraine's weekly program Doing Business, hosted by